Hello again, everybody. This is James Bartley, and you're watching and listening to the Cosmic Switchboard Show. Today, our very special guest is Geraldine Orozco. Geraldine is a healer. She's studied the connection between DNA and our soul, our oversoul. She's developed some practical methods to help us reacquire this knowledge about who we are, about ourselves from the information field. And she's had a lifetime of experiences. So without any further ado, Geraldine Orozco, welcome to the Cosmic Switchboard Show.
Hi, James. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
Well, the honor is all ours, Geraldine. Please tell our viewers and listeners about your origin story, how you came to be, and the milestones along the way.
Absolutely. So, I grew up in a very spiritual family to begin with. So I began meditating at an early age. And in 2008, I funded a meditation company here in the Bay Area where we teach corporate meditation. And I just wanted to meditate with people, essentially. And essentially, it grew from a small 1,000 people group into a business. But primarily, I experienced a very strong experience of one of my fiancés passing away at the time, and that kind of drove me into deeper questions, deeper awareness. I had been having interesting experiences throughout my life, but I hadn't been able to understand them, and I hadn't linked anything together at that point. But my inquiry was in order to understand what unconditional love was. I felt that at my age of 23, I didn't understand what love was. And so I went deep diving into meditation. I took about 4 months off of everything. And during that time, I feel that I was able to learn how to deprogram some subconscious core belief systems that, were indoctrinations, like belief systems of roles that we play, mother, father, lineage belief systems, everything down to the core, into a point where I reached kind of a zero point of just a state of awareness. And as I was looking and tracing back my origins of my family trauma, I began to go deep into ancestral lines, going back all the way to the origin. And it was at that point when I began to question, well, how is the structure created? There really seems to be a very deliberate structure to this system, through social engineering and all kinds of inputs. And my question was, who's behind the curtain, and what's happening there? And in October of 2013, this was the fourth month of my retreat, I had this incredible experience where at 3 a.m. on a Friday, white light enters my room. And essentially I get up, I go to my window, I look out the window, and I'm paralyzed, and I feel myself being drawn through the wall, and then appearing on the other side on top of the garage roof. And from the white light, these 6 beings, these giant 7-foot beings, are emerging, and they are tall, gray-like beings that look like a combination of humanoids and maybe large ant-type body structures. And one of them approaches me and lifts the hand and telepathically says the word calm, eliminates all the emotion from my body, and essentially I'm taken on board this gigantic light orb that is oscillating and super conscious technology. And as I enter into the craft, they create holograms around for me not to quite see where I'm going, and put me into this room. And my aunt is walking in the middle of 2 grays right in front of me. And she's in her nightgown, unconscious, her hair is messy. I call out her name, she can't hear me. And she's taken to the back, and, they remove these holographic figures that they put around me. And they begin to show me a blue prism, multi-layered prism, that begins to show me information. And the first one is a kind of very complex alien language. The second one is basically they show me the Pleiades constellation. And we are taken to the Pleiades and to the planet Maya. And I'm shown that I am one of these Pleiadian beings. and basically giving me information about what I had been, simultaneous timelines, that I had existed in this Pleiadian timeline multiple times, and that I had been teaching information at that time. And all of that did not make sense yet. We returned back to the craft, and they begin to show me 8 little lights. And from those 8 lights, 4 of them manifest into hybrid children, little children that are a combination of humanoids and alien beings, including gray beings and also kind of reptilian children. So when I see this, I'm shocked, not sure what to make of it. I'm trying to place it in my human memory, and trying to understand what had happened there. At what point had these children come to be, and what my role was with them. And I recognized the children so vividly, and they recognized me. They could see right through me, and they removed the children. And the next thing they show me, because I'm coming into a state of suffering, I'm trying to understand why they would remove these children. And they tell me, don't you understand? And they begin to show me a flower, and they go all the way down to the molecular level of the flower to show me its atom, the oscillation, and the networks of energy that put together to create this matter. And then they begin to show me the earth. And in terms of the matrix, essentially, this holographic construct in which we exist, and how humans essentially have a life force connection to this infinite potential, and how different human vessel is to the rest of the construct. There's a completely vibrational frequency difference to that. And I began to understand how deeply, deeply interconnected we are in this universe and this world. And for the first time in my life, I experienced a profound peace that I never knew before. So it was as a result of this experience that, when I gained consciousness, I'm back in my room, and I'm finding myself at the end of the bed, and I have little burn marks over here underneath my arm. My feet are dirty, and I'm immediately trying to think about calling the police or the hospital to see if I can get some kind of assistance, because I wasn't sure what happened to me there. But however, then on Monday, when I went back to work with my clients to teach meditation, I began to see these gigantic colors of lights from their bodies. And I realized that something had happened to me, something had changed. They had activated some psychic abilities. I was able to see their thoughts, their emotions. I could see the emotions in the body, the life force in the body, feel it in my body. So it had just ripped open this veil, and my life for the next 3 months was just paralyzed. I mean, I couldn't go out to the grocery shopping. I couldn't connect with anyone, because it would literally hurt to be around this sound. I could hear my neighbors talking. So it was very difficult. I had to kind of integrate and learn what was happening to me. I didn't understand these psychic abilities, how to create boundaries. I had to basically teach myself all that, because I wasn't sure where to find other experiences. And this was back when this topic wasn't so available, so it was just very hard to even find the language to research this. And 5 years later, I decided to get a hypnotherapy. I joined a support group for the first time, and I began to realize that, I'm not the only person that's having these contact experiences. And I decided to dive deep into hypnotherapy. I became certified in hypnotherapy and epigenetic psychotherapy, because the amount of information that was downloaded to me in that experience, and also in these hypnotherapies, took me back to the origin of humankind, the inception of humanity, to better understand the hybridization program. And essentially that developed into a profound understanding of our genetics and the morphogenetic field, and how we're so deeply interconnected. And essentially my research with working with contactees over the past 10 years now, is really demonstrating that we have contact that's embedded and encoded in our family lineage. It's in our ancestral lineage. And it's passed down through generations, as it happened with myself, because, years later, when I participated in Extraordinary the Seeding in the documentary, and my family saw this publicly, the stories started to come out from my family about their contact experiences. The aunt that was on board the craft was conscious on board the craft, remembers being on board, remembers her experience there, and remembers something being put here in the back of her head. And next thing you know, she's in the hospital for 24 hours directly that Monday, that Sunday, actually, that same Sunday. They have an unknown illness, and then it just goes away after this contact experience. And that's happened to her a couple times since then. And so what's interesting is that, we're not really just making up these experiences. These experiences we are entering into another realm. And it really speaks to another unfoldment of this multidimensional reality, this construct that we live in. And really, a lot of people are having these experiences, and the majority of these experiences are taking place in dream time. But there are cases like mine, for example, where these dimensions are merging, and we're having very, very physical, contact experiences. So this is kind of where I guess I began. From here, things unfolded into, more deeper research about this. But this is how it began.
I've read a bit about the morphogenetic field, the M field that Rupert Sheldrake describes it as, and I've always resonated with that. And then when I came across Michael Talbot's books, Beyond the Quantum and the Holographic Universe, that really made me sit up and take notice, because it explained a lot of things. And what I've since come to find out was it turned out that the author of the Holographic Universe turned out to be a contactee abductee himself. He'd apparently been regressed and worked with Bud Hopkins, of all people. So, and he didn't want that fact to get out while he was still alive, because he thought it might damage his credibility. But to people like us, it enhances his credibility, actually. Yeah. As far as the integration worked, you mentioned that it was all very overwhelming to you initially. What I found, Geraldine, is so many people like us, when they have a realization that these things are happening to them, because the internet is, the availability of the internet, I think what happens sometimes is people become from a shame-based origin, many of us. And so we tend to look outside of ourselves, and the tendency is to just go web surfing, YouTube surfing, and getting all this input from all these people. How are you able to, maintain your navigational course and, pull in the information that you needed to pull in and not get distracted, from all these different directions? What was the process of screening all that out?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and extremely important, and one that I'm very, I guess there's a certain passion that I have in terms of trying to educate or share this information with as many people, how to gain this clarity. Because we actually, what I learned through having multidimensional senses in my own body and also working with others, is that there's a certain architecture to this construct. There's a physical, there's a bioelectrical, biochemical system, and we are also a geometric construct in our bodies. There's certain geometry that comes into organization in the body as we develop these abilities, such as psychic abilities, intuitive abilities, all of these higher faculties that the human has. And essentially, what it comes down to is the cultivation of those higher faculties, or the rapid activation of them, is something that we need to learn how to integrate within us. And the process of that for me was a complete clearing and distillation of all my belief systems to the very core of a 0 point, and really coming to that observer state, which is not tainted in any way or infused or influenced by emotions, imbalanced emotions, because the core root of a confused perception comes from imbalanced emotions. Our emotions, and they're very deeply layered. They're deeply layered in constructs and belief systems that we take on, which are not even ours. So I think in my case, it was a complete refinement of those belief systems down to its really core. And what you discover, what the human has the potential of discovering, is that there are certain main laws in this universe that are true, that govern this construct. They're universal laws of, I guess, the biophysics of how we interact with this holographic system, how we input a bioelectrical charge in order to create experiences, manifestation laws, attraction laws, and all of them are extremely important in the kind of experiences that we have, that we create, that we manifest. And they're also extremely important in the way that we navigate and discern in order to tap into free will. Now, I am one of those people that not quite believe in that we have free will, and simply because of the profound level of complexities and interdependence that the human plays in the bigger picture of things. But that means that we play an extremely important role in leading this collective, but through our choices, our emotional choices, and the discernment in that we're making in the waking state and also in dream state. In fact, what I discovered is that one of the most powerful realms in which we navigate is the dream state. And this is something that all ancient cultures since the beginning of time have been training and working towards. Is the cultivation of how do you navigate death? You are preparing for death, essentially. And the navigation of dream state is entering into these higher dimensional realms in which we are encountering these beings. And many people around the world are waking up to, just because of the state that we're in collectively right now, the vibrational frequency of the collective is at a stage in which the veil has thinned and will be thinning more and more, which means more people are having contact, more people are connecting with these entities and beings, higher intelligence, higher consciousness beings. And so we need to learn pretty quickly how to navigate that, how to discern. And so essentially the laws of navigation in dream state are exactly the same ones of waking state. Because it's all about how you master this physical vessel, and because we are a toroidal, just looking at the basic structure of our body, the way that we spin, our spin rate in a centripetal spin is actually the key to navigation. When we enter into a high centripetal spin instead of looking outside, as you mentioned, where we leak our life force into a centrifugal spin, this is where the human begins to regain its creative ability, its creative power. And through the process of reorganizing, quieting that reptilian brain, the analytical mind, and beginning to develop a meditative state of observation, that we can regulate the nervous system in order to refine the intuitive abilities, these intuitive faculties. And those are actually what will help navigate your life, the co-creation of that life. And it's very important also that part of these laws that we understand the polarity of these experiences. It's a very cyclical design. There's a very cyclical design to the experience of polarity that humans have. And a lot of humans have a really hard time understanding that. We need to cycle through these polarities until we learn how to balance those energies within ourselves, which essentially help us discern better. And so we're going to be uncovering many layers. Some of our experiences are going to be super high vibration, beautiful experiences, and some of them are going to be seemingly traumatic and very difficult to process and integrate. And it's important that we embrace all of these experiences to refine our ability to navigate. And we do this in waking state with our trauma and with our experiences in our everyday life, but we also need to do that in the dream state. And that's where these experiences come into play.
Joseph Campbell talks about the rebirth, the death aspect of ourselves as we come to epiphanies and awareness of ourselves and our mission. How would you differentiate from your perspective and what you've learned the difference between an evolved spiritual, multidimensional society, civilization, for the most part, that's unmolested by lower vibratory forces, pretty much capable of doing what they want, and us here, we had previously, I love the way you describe it, because I've always talked about it as not just past lives, but parallel lives. They're parallel to us. They're going on simultaneously in a different frequency. How would you contrast, and where do you see like the main outer ring barriers, if you will, that prevent most people and societies and civilizations from reconnecting to what they were originally all about? Because to me, it seems if I were to draw like a human, or rather like a parallel in the animal world, I would think about salmon going upstream to spawn. They know they're going to die, but in this one last act before they die and leave their mortal coil, they have this big, fertilization, eggs, and more salmon are born into our world. But it's a death and dying process. And really quickly, to interject my own experiences, I think what some of the ETs were doing with me in my high school years, I was living in San Jose, California at the time, and I would have a number of psychic experiences, including out-of-body experiences. And I think some of these out-of-body experiences were externally induced, because prior to the onset of them, I would sense more than feel like a kind of like a heat or an energy signature, and I would start to feel vibrations, and I'd come out of my body. And I realized that if I didn't stay out of my body for a certain length of time and then come back into my body, I would never get any sleep. I would just be out of my body all night, and I had to get up and go to work at the school the next morning. So it was a process of breaking down, the Mr. Spock side of my psyche, where I had always had to logically construct and make sense of things, but in a very Spock analytical type way. And yet we live in a multidimensional, holographic universe. So if you wouldn't mind, just the contrast between these higher evolved spiritual beings and us, and the layers between us and them.
Yes. May I please ask, who is Spock? What is Spock?
Well, if you remember the old original Star Trek series, right? Mr. Spock, he was the counterpart to Captain Kirk. Yeah, and the reason that I bring it up is because there were a number of times when I was in a calm, not even realizing, meditative state. Some download would start coming in, and my feeble brain would start to try to analyze it, right? So instead of just letting it come through, process it, and then, come to an epiphany later, sometimes Mr. Spock would elbow his way in and try to understand the images and the feelings, impressions I was getting, and the connection would be lost. And that happened more often than not, So, mea culpa.
Right. Yeah, I understand. Okay, well, yeah, your question is awesome, and there's a couple layers and a couple things I want to remember here. You asked about the purpose. Well, I'm going to share with you what I have understood from my experiences, but also from studying contactees and what they seem to be gathering. In reality, so first of all, we are multidimensional. And what that means is that within our own physical body, we hold a fractal of the universe. And I would say that fractal of the universe that we hold encoded in our body is recorded in our DNA, in our genetic code. Our genetic code, 2% to 3% of that genetic code is writing the protein of this physical body, physical vessel. Included in that 2 to 3% is essentially everything that comes with this vessel. And what is that? That's basically your DNA and your ancestral information that's passed down to the generations of your human lineages. So mother, father lineage, all the way back to its origin in the conception of time in this timeline, because there are multiple timelines in which we are also existing in. Okay, a little complex, I understand. But what happens is that first, I guess to answer your question about the purpose, the first purpose essentially would then be what the human is trying to transcend in this holographic construct of the matrix, which is to transcend and regulate all of the inherited trauma and limiting belief systems that doesn't allow the human to be able to have full navigation or awareness of itself as that whole universe. And I think that that's number one, because until we deprogram those belief systems that have been inherited through mother, father, and we are deconstructing the matrix through that work, because all of the social engineering that's taken on, for generations and generations, inversions of truths, inversions of universal truths that we see in this world that we take on as truth, that create suffering, that create limitation and separation, make us believe the illusion of separation, which is not a truth. The truth is that we're extremely unified. And so when you begin to open up your abilities or begin to navigate in these dream states, you begin to see these other realms, which are very real, and there are very real expressions of you. As you wake up consciousness, those dreams will be very convoluted, they will be mixed up, they will be very abstract, fuzzy, unsure, just very difficult for the human to find meaning in those dreams exactly. But as a person starts to refine their frequency, cleaning up all of this ancestral information, disconnecting from internal influences, patterns of vibrational frequency like TV, radio, which are constantly infusing very specific frequencies and perceptions in your subconscious mind, that clearing of that will allow you to refine your discernment in the information that you're accessing. And one of the purposes is to refine this so that we can, because only then, mechanistically, can the body begin to navigate higher dimensions. Okay, there are brain waves that need to be cultivated, like the alpha state in waking state, and then be able to go deeper states in dream state. And that level, that deeper level of brain wave, triggers you to cultivate melatonin in the pineal gland, but also create DMT to begin to see and navigate these realms. And there's many other mechanisms in the body, including your spinal fluid, how you are transmuting all of this information from your ancestral lineage from a lower frequency into a higher frequency. Your body then becomes this transduction mechanism that transforms that. And the process and cultivation of that grows your energetic field, grows gray matter in the brain and in the spinal cord, which allows you to go into higher dimensions every time. And so when you access these higher dimensional realms, these beings are actually, you discover, these beings are also going through some kind of evolutionary process. And it seems that within the main 13 dimensions of this holographic construct is made up of 13 dimensions, which we have access through the DNA immediately. Okay, so most people can access somewhere around those 13 dimensions, at least at some point in their life. And within that construct, everything seems to be operating within these polarities, within this dualistic construct. What that means is that the kind of experiences that are going to be had are going to be based on certain exchanges. Okay, this is where we begin to have, parasitic beings, and then beings that are creators. And those are two different elements of these realms. The more parasitic beings are the ones that are exchanging things for their own gain, for their own survival, things like this. And those are very much in the ranges of species that we're interacting with, like Draco, Reptilian, Pleiadian, Lyran, Arcturian, you name it, all of these different kinds of species that we're connecting with. But what I'm finding is that these different species are embedded in the DNA of my patients. So contactees are actually having these contact with specific family groups and even council-like groups of different kinds of species that make up the family lineage. So in a sense, what we're clearing up now is not only our ancestral lineage that's terrestrial, but also interdimensional. And given these lineages, as you become aware of them, there is work that has to be done. There are agreements that have been made in lower states of consciousness, higher states of consciousness, that it's important for the human to become aware of and discern, because the more you refine these parts of you, the more you can access free will, which allows you. So, and just to mention, what I have explored is that what free will really is the integration of all your parts. your ability to come into that 0 point, that observer state of non-judgment, in which unconditional love emerges, where you see all as a part of you. This is extremely essential, and this is also the state in which most of these higher, highly evolved intelligences, they exist in that. And only in that state are they able to have instant manifestation, instant, because if you think about it, manifesting for us humans, right now it's speeding up. But we're also learning, the learning curve is pretty steep, because the consequences of that instant manifestation, sometimes positive and sometimes it's pretty, traumatic and very stressing, cause suffering for the human, because we haven't mastered our intentions yet. And to answer your question in resume, what I'm discovering is that the collective purpose of all humans, looking at all these different levels of evolution that we have to overcome, is unity. And how is it unity? Because what we're shifting is from the old human, the parasite, let's say the parasitic, and we all have parasitism within us in our subconscious layers, right? The one that sees from separation or for gain or for self-service, that will be creating separation in this collective. The human that is working now towards a higher state of awareness, intelligence, consciousness, much like these higher civilizations, is looking at their choices now are not only good for themselves, but it's good for the whole collective. It's good for humanity. And that really changes perspectives, because we begin to understand where our money is being put, where we're investing, right? And what systems are we supporting with that investment, what we're saying, our intentions, how it affects our collective, our ancestral lineage. So the mind is training to become a universal expanded mind. And this is the new human that is now emerging at this time. It is a multidimensional human that begins to master its co-creation. And through that refinement of its genetic data, the kind of information that it is processing through this very beautiful organism of creation, is now something to bring unity and healing for the collective. And it's something that we're learning by interacting with some of these high vibration beings, or these beings of future. And remember, time, as you mentioned, it's not linear. It is very much simultaneous. So we're interacting with these simultaneous aspects, which I do believe are fractals of our own self, that we are kind of interacting with future selves, past selves. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Well, yes, it did. And I've always viewed us, and you just articulated this beautifully, as the sum of all of our parts. So we've got to come to grips with, like in my own case, I've had some very military conquest type incarnations just here on Earth, right? Where I was often as not the invader and the conqueror of one tribe or another. And that was, I guess, balanced to some degree with more mundane lives, or I guess lives on the receiving end of the stick of oppression and conquest and what have you. And to me, it's part of this learning process and an unfoldment, because if we don't strip away the trauma and the shame-based programming that comes at so many levels, it makes it difficult for us to reconnect with our core expression of ourselves, which is a fundamental intrinsic part of the wider information field, right? And I've always felt that if we can, it's kind of a term that's been hijacked, and I don't want to sound, sling labels and nasty names at people, but from the New Age perspective, they talk about raising one's vibrations, and there's something to that. But sometimes I think there's an unbalanced aspect where, by doing so, from their perspective, they're constantly in their headspace rather than being embodied and being, integrated, because we have to be comfortable in our own skin, and that's a difficult thing that we have to overcome and master because of all the trauma and all the shame-based programming. Now, from your perspective, in the time we got left in the first segment, this has been a fascinating discussion. I've come to the point, you describe it brilliantly, 0 point, from the perspective of, I don't hate our oppressors. I don't spend a lot of time expressing all this disgust and negativity at them, because I know from this construct perspective, there's the prey and then there's the predators. If you see a video of a Komodo dragon or a monitor lizard swallowing whole a goat, it's unfortunate for the goat, right? But the monitor lizard has to eat. So we're in a situation where if the goat had more awareness and self-awareness, it would flee when it saw a monitor lizard. But sometimes, and I think for a long time, these parasitic beings, they've held a tactical high ground, if you will, because of this multi-layered long-term, especially the disastrous impact religious programming has had throughout the ancestral lines. I'm from a Filipino Spanish perspective. So, the Catholic Church having that long involvement in the Philippines for like centuries, just imposing all that on those people for so long. And it created all kinds of confusion and shame. So, what I see is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is just this need, and it's just a work in progress, to divest ourselves of these unwanted attachments and energetic vibrations which hold us back, and modes of thinking, because in the spirit world, as you know, thoughts are things, and then reconnect. And I know in my case, it's happened cyclically and it's happened periodically, but things have happened which reminded me of my own multidimensional self. And a lot of it has to do, like you said, with the astral dreamscape. So much of what I've learned about myself has occurred not only in the astral dreamscape, but what appears to me to be, Geraldine, at times, go dimension hopping at night, almost in an alternate reality where we're in a place that seems to be like Earth, looks like Earth, but in deep down that this is not quite the place where I'm used to. Subtle differences, and then I go and I explore those places, and I recognize that this multiverse is teeming with life, and as you say, we have all these aspects of us coexisting simultaneously. It's a process of reintegration. Now, having said that, and being what I perceive to be boots on the ground, we are some of all of our parts. It seems to me that there is this internal struggle between these beings that were descended from our expanded, higher dimensional ET family and these parasitic beings. It seems like the conflict, the battleground is within us, and we have to find a way to create that separation in a way where we just don't heap scorn and hate on the Draco and the Mantis Beings and all that are in large part are doing this to us, because as you said, we have this multidimensional capability. It seems to me, Geraldine, that these parasitic negative beings have the means to trigger and activate these higher dimensional psychic abilities within us when we're in their presence. And then when they want to use us for particular roles and tasks, they can activate that within this. And increasingly, it seems, the military, deep black military, has the means to do this too. They can access us and utilize us in these ops and these training programs. How do we get to that point where we can do this of our own volition, where we can do this standalone? If we decide to work with our higher dimensional positive ET family, we can. And other times, it seems to me also that we can do things on a standalone basis. When we go dimension hopping at night, we just seem to be guided by this, oversoul. This is what we're supposed to do in this particular realm. And I hope I made sense saying all that, but, your thoughts on that, but, wrapping up this first segment.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So wonderfully said. Thank you so much for talking about this. Yes. And so the military element of it is a very real element. And we have to understand, first of all, the root of all of this. And let me just really quickly give you an overview here. So the activation of your higher faculties is causing a kind of mutation in DNA, biochemically and bioelectrically. The charge of your DNA becomes stronger. Okay, as when you are a human that activates your intuition faculties. Now, this has been known for many generations, and which is why these kinds of cultivation of higher faculties has been suppressed through history, and also weaponized and utilized for a very small group that has come into power and control. And so we're kind of coming out of these dark ages, and this is essentially the process, the cycle that we have all participated in genetically. We have those cycles encoded in our DNA, but we also have encoded in our DNA the many generations of our ancestors that have reached higher states of consciousness, that have reached shaman levels of awareness. And all of that contributes to our ability, our facilitation of what we access in this lifetime. The beings, the higher conscious beings that we interact with, but also the lower dimensional beings that we access. Now, this is part of this polarity because we live in this dualistic, the 3D that we exist in this holographic construct is governed by the laws of duality. So in order for us to experience this infinite potential through the physical vessel, this polarity is necessary. This is the experience that we have chosen, it seems, to experience in this construct. This is a temporary truth while we are incarnated. And so as a result of that, the navigation of that means that all of these ancestral lineages that we hold in our DNA make certain bloodlines more usable, more targeted in a way for some of these kinds of programs. And not only that, but literally they're using technology that is kind of scanning and kind of monitors the frequencies collectively, okay? And so when a person comes into awakened states of consciousness, it creates a ripple in this field of energy in the collective that is felt, it's governed, and somewhat managed by these beings. And essentially, these government groups, at the core root of them, seem to be managed by some of these kind of more shadow beings. Because they are more parasitic consciousness. We literally have that embedded in our own biology. We need to understand that. So not what we experience externally is a direct reflection of what we have within this physical vessel, individually and collectively. And so one of the things that is hand in hand, the evolutionary process of deprogramming, that matrix programming, will help us clean up collectively the influence and the power that these parasitic beings have upon us. However, we are always experiencing that duality. And that's why I mentioned that within the 13 dimensional realms, we're still experiencing polarity, because it seems that all the beings that people are interacting with 13 dimensions under seem to be going through these dualistic kind of exchanges. And that means they're encountering parasitism. And really, sometimes it's hard for the human to discern the difference until they understand the exchange rate. The exchange rate has a lot to do with our genetics. And because the genetic is the blueprint code of ourselves, but also our DNA becomes a portal into different lineages of information. Now, we are what I discovered with the work is that we're actually hybridized ourselves. So that being said, if our DNA holds these lineages of information, which allow us to timeline jump and to travel into these other dimensions through our genetic code, we are able to access the information, the streams of the ancestral lineage for those species as well. And some of us have more of those influences of those species developed in our biology than others. So if we have more of the reptilian aspect DNA within us, we tend to have more survival mechanisms, militaristic consciousness, and it goes down generations. We have military down our family. We're deeply embedded in that. And so these are the kind of things that when we come into awareness, this is not easy to come by this information. It takes, a lot of time to come by this information. But the integration of these parts of us will help our navigation and our discernment in the bigger picture. Yes, did I miss some? I'm not sure if I answered everything because I forget what else you asked. You asked so many important questions, James.
Well, yeah, all of that is key. Again, we're the sum of all our parts. I don't want to put too negative a spin on it, but it's kind of a cliche. The conflict is within. We've got to resolve a lot of these.
Absolutely.
Like, for example, and we can get into this in the second segment, I believe that some of us have what I call incarnational infiltrations, where we choose from an oversoul perspective to incarnate into the Draco society. not just once, but once you get in there, you have the means to reincarnate again. And there's no better way to understand the dynamics of a culture, of a conquering culture, not just an earth-based Roman, Viking, Mongol type culture, which many of us have had, but from the perspective of an intergalactic, universal conquering kind of race, there's no better way to understand how the inner dynamics of that society than to incarnate into it. And the best operative is one who doesn't know he or she is an operative. So if one is in that society, in that civilization, behaving as they are, and all value judgment stripped aside, not holding ourselves necessarily accountable and taking on all that karmic burden and guilt in the process, but recognizing that was something that we had at a very real level chosen to do. And so you see that play out, that inner conflict where all these forces push and pull to keep us from recognizing, reconnecting with our core element, which connects with a greater information field. And so, as you pointed out, you look at what they're doing in society, they're engendering within the whole surface population more and more reptilian, parasitic tendencies with the Luciferian Marxist indoctrination in the schools, et cetera, et cetera. And now with the total inversion of everything we see in society, the perversity, the predatory behavior, which is inculcated into the masses under the guise of survival, right? We have to be intolerant of all these people that have differing views from us. We're going to shout them down. We're going to cancel them. We're going to eliminate them because that's the next step in the process. And first you shut them down from speaking their truth, and then you just get rid of them, So we're in a situation now going forward where there's this push and pull where, the fundamental concepts are changing. We are, some of it, I don't mean this in an egotistical sense, that for some people that have this, lack of a better term, alien DNA, higher dimensional connection, they're doing everything they can to just really smash and annihilate people. If they can't neutralize them, and if they can't use them in their own programs, they're going to neutralize them to the point where they're just incapable even of taking care of themselves. This is why you see so many people like us that have had my lab experiences, had abductee experiences. They haven't had the right counsel, the right association, and then they went off, they kind of fell off the reservation and had all these difficulties. So, well, we're just getting started, Geraldine. Thank you for sharing this in our first segment. Can you tell our audience how they can get a hold of you and your websites?
Yes, absolutely. And I just want to add one more thing to that last thing, is that my point was that in order to access that soul connection and to be sovereign from all of these influences, it's the deprogramming of your DNA into that 0 point. That is the absolute key, because that's the embodiment of the source in the body, infinite potential, which you can now create as you can manifest your life outside of these influences. And there's a deeper explanation about that. We can talk about that later. But yeah, if you want to get a hold of me, GeraldineOrozco.com is my website. And if you're a contactee, you can find me at hybridmother.com. I have a YouTube channel where I discuss these topics in depth at Geraldine Orozco, and I'm very happy to connect with everyone. Thank you so much, James.
And to our dear listeners and viewers out there, if you like what we do, if you believe in what we do, please go to thecosmicswitchboard.com, sign up and become a member, and we'll see you at the top of the next segment.